How do you know what to do with your life? Let's find out together today on Happy Hour. Taking a lighter tone at the podcast for young adults here at the Cathedral of the Most Sacred Heart of Jesus. I'm Rick, and today I have in studio a guest who has been on the podcast before, but it's been a little while. It's been a hot sec, so we're gonna just let you introduce yourself and tell us what's up.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's me, Noah. Rick's son. And yeah, I just been getting adjusted to a new life. I just graduated college, so
It's true, you did.
Trying to get on my own phone plan, trying to get a new car, new job, all those adulting things we don't want to do, but here we are.
That's right. The madness, the craziness of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so good though. It's the nervousness and the scariness of it all, but there's also the that desire that we have for independence anyway, that you get to experience, and you're making a life for yourself. It's not somebody else's. You get to make the calls, right, for good or for bad.
Exactly. And it was funny because I just took a trip out to Chattanooga yesterday, and it was the first time I drove by myself. Like, I never really, because I moved around a lot during that time when I was supposed to get my driver's license. So
different
I just
states,
recently got it. Yeah,
different
states,
requirements, all that stuff. Yeah.
All that stuff. So it's weird gaining that sort of independence. It was, but it's been good. It's been real good.
Yeah, it's great, and it's really good to, just as a father, seeing it happen and just see you get to experience life. And it's funny on the flip side of things, like when you're driving out to Chattanooga, I know your mom is all nervous and scared for you, and I'm just like, cut the cord, Mom. No, I'm just kidding.
It's like, yeah, he'll be fine.
But that's that reassurance that, as a parent, you hopefully you do your best as best you can. You make a lot of mistakes and you do a lot of good things, but in the end, you just hope that you've given everything you can, and then you trust the Lord with the rest. That's why I never get too nervous. I feel like we've done as much as we could, and then we allow the Lord to then just take what we've done and foster that into maturity in you and in the others. And we'll see how that all pans out. You've always been the test subject, so we'll do that again with you.
The guinea pig.
Yeah, why not, right?
Exactly.
Well, speaking of that, knowing that you graduated and kind of moving on to a new, season is a very popular term.
Yeah,
it's a new season in life.
That's what the kids say,
That's
think
what
nowadays.
The kids are calling it. Let's talk a little bit about how is it that we find our purpose in life, especially through the lens of like being a Catholic Christian. How is that supposed to guide us, or is this just kind of, we'll make our decisions and we'll fit our Catholicism within the confines of where we make our decisions? Or is it the other way around, where all of that shapes our decisions?
Right. Yeah. And I think, coming from someone who has recently gone through high school and college, it's like there's a lot of things that go on in both of those, areas of life where you're joining a bunch of clubs, you're finding new friends, you're doing all this new stuff, you're trying to find how to balance your faith life and all that, and it's you're trying to find so many, you're essentially running tests, right? You're trying to see what sticks, what doesn't, what do you like, what do you absolutely despise, and so trying to find your position, your purpose, and all that it's a lot. And I think something that I wish I had learned earlier was you don't have to be involved in a million things at once, as long as you're involved in the one or two things that you're really passionate about and you really are good at, right? And so, and I feel like that kind of gets lost in this generation a lot, especially, with multitasking our attention span. We're just trying to do as many things as we can as possible at once, right?
Right.
And so sometimes I feel like we just need to kind of slow down, put our foot on the brake, because I'm just learning how to drive. I'm using driving terminology now.
Very nice. Good segue.
Hey, exactly. But yeah, no, just kind of slowing down, really just, be in the moment and realize what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, just thinking back to when I was that age and just thinking, I probably did a lot of the similar things where didn't appreciate the moment in the moment, appreciate it later, but taking the time out to not be so busy and maybe find more meaning in what you're doing rather than just doing more things, right? So we might have some ways, we got some talking points that we want to hit on today. Well, hopefully it gives you some tips and tricks if you're listening and want to decide, or at least start the discernment process, where you're being called to serve, where you should live. Are you called to the married life, single life, religious life, whatever it is. All these things, I think actually, it sounds very complicated. It sounds like a lot, but I honestly believe it's truly very simple, because I don't believe God wants to make it difficult on anybody to find out what they're supposed to be doing. I don't think it's like some big puzzle that we're supposed to solve.
Right.
It's funny because we do those lockbox games with like the students, and you have to come up with a code for the lockbox, but the only way to get the code is you got to decipher this thing, and then you got to decipher this thing, and then decipher this thing. And if you got it all right, then you could come up and try the lock pad that has the 3-digit combination from those things that you... No, it's not like that.
It's not an escape room.
Exactly. It's not supposed to be. So maybe there's some ways that we can simplify things through our conversation and just help people to discern, because I don't know how well we as a human species discern things, right? True. I think we make a lot of knee-jerk reaction decisions, and I don't know how much intentionality is put behind most of our decision making. I mean, I thought I saw a study that said something like just in the mornings you make 500 decisions.
Wow,
like 500 choices just in the morning. And you're like, no, there's no way. But think about it. If you drive, you're making a lot of decisions just driving.
That's true.
How about what you're going to wear? You're deciding on the socks that there's so many choices. Am I going to eat? If I am, what am I going to eat? If I do, am I taking it with me on the road? There's so many decisions being made all the time. How intentional are we about our decisions, especially these big things? And I think this is going to be one of the keys is, do we look to God even for the small decisions to help us with the big ones? So, but we'll get there. We'll talk about those things. It's going to be a great conversation. I thought, though, maybe we could start just kind of talking about, does God even care about what we're supposed to be doing with our lives, or how does he even tell us, or what does that look like? We'll talk about, vocations in a minute, but I thought maybe we should just delve into, have you ever noticed God talking to you about what you should be doing with your life? Again, you're just recently graduated. You are now in your first career. It could be your only career. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be.
But at least right now you're in your first career. And have you ever have you listened to God? Has he kind of spoken to you in any way, shape, or form? Or is it just kind of a decision you made?
Yeah. I think when we mention, is God speaking to you, we sort of immediately start to think of like a literal sense, like a voice in your head kind of thing. Right. And while there are a couple points in my life that I could point to where God has spoken to me, I really do feel like he just speaks to me through situations or other people. I remember earlier this week, I was just going through it, like just flipping myself out essentially, just like, oh my gosh, like, what am I supposed to do right now? Am I the most qualified? I feel like someone else would know what to do right now. And I was just like, I sit down and said, I have a little, a statue of Jesus I got recently as one of my graduation gifts. And I just looked at it and I was like, Jesus, just help me, just be with me,
Yeah, that's so good.
Just calm these anxieties, calm these doubts. Just let me know what you want me to do and I'll do it. Right. Because ultimately it's not up to me. Whatever I do, as much as I want to think, what can I do? What can I bring? And while those things can be important, the most important thing is, what does God want me to do? What does God want me to bring? Right. And so, I'd like to say those stresses and doubts disappeared immediately. They didn't. It took maybe another hour or two.
Yep, of course.
But throughout the rest of the day, I was talking with my boss, Brittany, and just going over some things, and she was laying out expectations. I'm trying to help plan the Steubenville retreat right now, which will be first weekend of July. And she was just kind of helping me go through, like, all right, this is what you would need to plan, and like kind of laying it out. And, a lot of times when I'm trying to, when I'm stressing out about things and trying to do things, talking about it out loud or having someone like explain like a step-by-step, thing for me to do is very helpful. I'm a very like organized person that way. Yeah. I kind of need it a little spelled out sometimes. So, just that and a combination of other factors that day just really helped me feel at peace. Yeah. And like, I was able to go through and like look at some merchandise, design a sticker that, I'll probably, give to the kids as part of the merchandise. And just like, it was just a bunch of things. And I was having fun, and like my emotions just immediately 180'd, right? Like that. And, it was just, it wasn't, again, like it wasn't a specific, like God said, yo, dude, chill, like, be calm. It was a series of things that happened that day that ended up helping me calm down. And I was like, thank you, God.
Some of those things are probably, they seem super small. I made a sticker. Like I designed a sticker,
right?
but what it does for you, and I think there's a lot of we can find God in the small things too, and where He's speaking to us. We're looking for the big booming voice, and yet what do we know from Scripture? That He's there in the stillness and in the quiet. So paying attention to even those little details, I think, is super important. And when you spoke about it, like you were having fun, you were finding joy in what you were doing as well. God wants you, believe it or not, God wants you to have fun and enjoy what you do with your life. Yeah, that's why He gives you those, the abilities and the desires, and where those cross meet. That's pretty much where what you should be doing with your life. He wants us to be joyful. He wants us to have fun when we're doing our stuff too. He created us to have fun, and I always think I was talking to a group of people that was, you know what it was? After Father David had given a homily here, I think this last weekend. What day? I think it was last weekend. He said it's Father Martin. I apologize. He said, how many people want to go to heaven? Everybody raised their hand. He says, how many people want to go to heaven right now or today? Nobody raised their hand. And, at that same day, I heard Father Mike Schmitz talk about how people don't want to leave this place because they have fun, right? And he said, there's more to it than just having fun. But just think about it logically for a second. If God created this place and you're having fun here, what do you think heaven's going to be like?
It's only going to be amplified.
Yeah. So that I don't buy that excuse. But what He does allow us to do when we're walking the right path is to have fun, is to enjoy what we're doing, even if it's hard. We still enjoy it. We still know that fighting for it is great. I believe that the Lord speaks to us as well through circumstances, through people especially. And I've had a couple of instances in my life where I know for sure the Lord was moving and telling me exactly where to go. But I only knew that because I was really listening.
Right.
And that's going to be the first part, I guess maybe the second part that we're talking about is listening to God.
And I was going to say too, you may not even recognize it in that moment that God was speaking to you. It's maybe when you just go back and look at it, you were like, oh yeah, that lines up. Because I was thinking about that recently too. I thought about how many times in my life throughout high school and even in college, how many people told me that I had the personality for a youth minister, or like to be in youth ministry, right? And in the moment it's like, oh, thanks, it's a nice compliment. But then just the gravitas of like how many times it's been said, and I can't help but think, it's God trying to speak to those people.
Yep. He was whispering the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Just through people. So let's talk about trusting God a little bit. Ooh. There's a couple pieces to that, right? Like if we really believe that we were created for a reason and a purpose, that means then there's a grand design, there's a grand plan for our lives. Now, there's God's permissive will, which we probably live in a lot, right? That He allows us to choose, but can still, bring about the kingdom through us, despite our making maybe not the best choices all the time, right? But then there's God's perfect will as well, right? So that's here. If you lined up with this, it's perfect. So does God want us to land on the perfect road? Of course. But when we make mistakes and we veer off that perfect road, He still is there 100%, just like He was on the perfect road. Just because you deviated from it doesn't change His opinion on you, or He doesn't change His desire to continue to call you to Him, right? So I'm not saying you should take the diverted road. Take the straight and narrow as much as possible, but when you divert from it, which you will, it's find out, listen to Him, trust Him, get back on the road. It reminds me of a scene from The Office when Michael is listening to the GPS, right?
Right.
And he's like, it's saying turn right. And Dwight's like, no, it means bear right. And he's like, no, turn right. And he's just getting all flustered and doesn't know what to listen to. And he pulls into the water and the car's in the water. I think sometimes we listen to too many voices outside of God's. And even sometimes we mix God's voice in there, but it's also with all the other voices. You really want to know what God thinks? Crazy advice, but ask him and then listen to him.
Whoa, crazy.
I know, crazy. Which means you must spend time in prayer. Because that's the top priority here is prayer. You want to know what you're supposed to do with your life? Pray. Pray and listen. And not just, God, what am I supposed to do? And then 2 seconds later, well, he's not talking. So now what?
Hit the refresh page. It's not loading.
Exactly. So prayer has to be at the center of what we do to discern our vocation in life. And when I say vocation, I don't necessarily mean married, single, religious. That is a vocation for sure. But your vocation in what? So for instance, my mom, your grandma, was a Dominican nun, but she was also a teacher at the same time, right? They're not mutually exclusive. So she knew she wanted to be a teacher. Her desire was for that. Her gifts and talents were in that area. The Lord let her go into that area, reassured her that's her area. So whether she was a nun or not, she was a teacher. And she was a teacher in both ways. She was a teacher when she was a nun in school, and she was a teacher outside of being a nun in a school, right? So discerning that vocation only comes through talking with the Lord.
Right.
It'd almost be like, me asking you, well, what would you like for your birthday? No, what kind of gift? And then not even listening and then just getting whatever I want for you.
Yeah.
Right. When we're not listening to the Lord. But if I say, well, what is it that you want? And then I stop and I really listen to what you're saying. And it's that clear. But if we have to stop, we have to listen, and then we have to act on that. I know too, though, when we talk about vocations, we do see that kind of simply from our married or not married status, but really we are talking about your career or occupation. And how does that encompass our entire life as a Catholic, right? Ooh, yeah. Are we Catholics in our workspace?
Right.
Are we trying to bring about the kingdom through our work? Whatever that work is, washing cars. Are you trying to bring about the kingdom through that? If you are a teacher, are you trying to bring about the kingdom through that? If you're a lawyer, are you trying to bring about the kingdom through that? Because in all those areas, you can be selfish. We could do what we want to do. We can try to accomplish what we want to accomplish. But also in all those areas, we're supposed to be bringing about the kingdom.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Because a lot of people think like, oh, well, people who work for the church and priests are more holy than me because they're working directly with that. When that's totally not the case at all.
Yeah.
That's one of the greatest things I've learned from college is that you can, like you said, you can bring about the kingdom of God through pretty much a lot of line of works. And, it's all about that intentionality, that being willing to incorporate your faith into workspace as much as you can. Right. And so, yeah, it's just, it's really cool. And not just that, but like, just the very fact that like, how great is it that God lets us choose,
Yeah.
He doesn't, like you said, he doesn't like ask us, it's like, come talk to me. And like, he doesn't just force that vocation on you, right? Whatever his plan is, we get to choose that. Right. And so it's beautiful.
And that free will is so important that God doesn't even touch it. Right. So that's how vital your decision-making is to the kingdom of heaven. Nobody else can make that decision for you. It's you. So this bleeds into, this prayer life, this really listening to God, I think bleeds into the sacramental life of the church, right? Participating in the liturgy, receiving the Eucharist, and how that helps to strengthen us, give us direction, give us confidence, and help us to realize that we are not built independent. We are built codependent on the Lord. So like you went all throughout college, you still experience the sacramental life, right? Like you'd go to church, you'd receive communion, you could go to confession, you could really receive all the sacraments. And did that make a difference for you?
Yeah, I mean, it totally does, particularly confession, more than more than others. But
Absolutely.
it's all just fantastic that those are so readily and often available. Because I can't tell you how many times I've gone to confession and how great it is that just like I feel like a weight has been put off my shoulders. Right? I feel more free. I feel almost like I could fly.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that those are pieces of God through Jesus being present in the priest or in the sacrament, it's just really like mind boggling. Like, I know we kind of just go through the motions sometimes. We're like, oh yeah, there's the piece of bread that's Jesus, you know, or like, oh yeah, we're talking to this priest, you know, about what we did last week that wasn't so good.
Yeah.
No, we're legitimately in contact with Jesus when we are confessing the sins to the priest. We're talking to Jesus.
Yeah.
When we eat that bread and drink that wine, that is the body and blood of Christ. Like, straight up.
Yep.
No, it's not just symbolic, right?
right.
It is the thing.
Yep.
And that is just absolutely crazy that, you know, Jesus is, you know, still trying to interact with our world in that way today.
Yeah. No, it's so good, because I think that sacramental life changes us completely, even when you're in the proximity of other people too, right? So church is not an individual thing. We go to church, it's the ultimate form of worship, right? Which we learn from Christ on the cross. That's the ultimate form of worship. And to lay ourselves down on the altar as sacrifice with Christ, bringing us as close as possible that we can be to Christ, is the most beautiful form of worship. But also the community that we get through that. You start to, you're in touch and in tune with other people who are in touch and in tune with the Lord. You tell me who your friends are, I'll tell you who you are, right? If you spend your time around people who love the Lord, guess what starts to happen to you? You transform as well, and you learn to love the Lord even deeper. There's some, in my area here, in my office, it's a pretty cool office. Everybody seems to love it. I just make it my own. But it has some fun stuff in it too, and really intentional things where you walk in, and inevitably anybody that walks in, they touch on something here, because there's a lot of things, a lot of different things in here. And like, oh my gosh, you have that. And it's a talking point, right? But a lot of the young people come in here and they go, wow, this is the cool. I always tell them too, I say, could you imagine if when you grow up, you worked in an office like this? They're like, that would be the best. And then I look them dead in the eye and I say, 100%, you absolutely can. This is a possibility for you.
Yeah.
Right? I also tell them that, have you ever considered being a priest? Have you ever considered being a nun? Those are absolute possibilities for you. If we don't encourage people in the sacramental life, what are we doing? Sometimes they don't even know it's an option, right?
Yeah.
So,
And plus, it's pretty nice to have a signed photo of the Karate Kid, you know?
a little rough macho.
Yeah, a little bit.
Little William Zabka.
Yeah. And, you know, just touching on that too, like Eucharist obviously is like the high point of Mass. That is the whole purpose and being, right?
Yeah.
But also just how many different things we are brought together in community in the Mass, right? I'll never forget someone I took sacred choir with in my freshman year of college. His name is Timothy. I think you've, I've talked about him
dude.
once or twice. Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah.
He told me, he was like, when we sing at Mass, when we sing together, it's our breathing essentially kind of like, your heart rate needs to match like, your regulatory system, how you breathe. And so if everybody's singing the same song, your hearts actually align because it's beating to, regulate your breathing. And so even in singing, like our hearts are one in the Mass,
That's awesome.
Which is just so cool. And it's changed my whole perspective on like,
that's pretty neat.
Singing the Psalms and the, all the different ones throughout the Mass. But yeah, it's just, the Mass never fails to astound me.
Yeah.
And just how connected and unifying it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And how otherworldly it is. Right. So how can we actually recognize and interpret the signs and invitation that God gives to us in our daily lives? I think is a fair question. And it's, I'm of the firm belief that the Lord speaks to us in ways that we understand. Now, that might not mean you will understand it, but it definitely means that I will understand it. And I've seen this so many times throughout my life, people telling me, yeah, I just knew that this is what it was, and everybody else thought I was crazy. But I know that it was God telling me this. And maybe people listening have experienced that as well, where they have been the one that God has told or somebody else told, and you guys are like, it seems a little out there, it seems a little weird. And I'll just share a quick story to kind of make that point. Is when we moved from Michigan to Florida, it was seemingly, it didn't make a lot of sense because all of our family, all of the ministry that we've been building over years was happening up in Michigan. And I took a flight down to go meet with the priest, Father Tom, amazing dude, and just kind of talk about what the possibilities were and everything, and then flew back. And that seems like, oh, well, then you just make your decision, right? Well, here's the thing. My flight down there was awesome. I sat next to two people. We had incredible conversations. This is before everybody wore earbuds, but we had incredible conversations, right? And we were just talking about the Lord and really just sharing each other's experiences. It was such an uplifting thing. It seemed that there were no babies crying. It seemed like everybody's getting along in the plane. The stewardesses were unbelievable. They even made fresh baked chocolate chip cookies. You could smell it throughout the entire cabin. And before we had to put the trays up and everything, they said, you guys have been so great. We're going to come around. We got chocolate chip cookies for you. Take as many as you want. And they were huge, like the size of my face, right? And they were amazing.
Wow.
So it was awesome. Beautiful touchdown and landing. Everything was great. And when I went to Florida and spoke with Father, everything, it just seemed right. Like everything matched up. And then it came time for me to fly home. And the flight back was awful. The first plane that I got on to go back had something wrong with it, and we didn't know till midair. And so that we had to make a different landing, an alternate landing. And everybody was just so upset, even just getting on the plane. And we sat on the tarmac for like an hour before we even took off. And then we had to go fly. We had to land in a different state. And then there's layover. And we got on a really small plane. I didn't think we were going to make it back. Everybody was angry. The stewardess was just literally throwing peanuts at us. It was awful. It was terrible. And I finally got home. And that's when I realized the Lord was speaking. Now, again, all of that was interpreted to me like I understood 100% what was being told to me. And what was being told to me was, if you go down and you go to Florida, well, maybe not everything will always be perfect, but it is going to be good. You're going to have the experience I want you to have. And now you can stay in Michigan, right? But it's not going to be my perfect will. It'll be my permissive will, but it will not be my perfect will for you. And you will have trouble. And you will know it. And so I just paid attention to those signs. So I personally do believe the Lord does talk to us. Sometimes it's like that, and I was taken aback when I realized what was happening. I said, whoa, and I understood it. I told somebody else, they're like, no, those are just coincidences. I said, well, to you they are. To me, the Lord was speaking. And because he was talking directly to me, right, not to anybody else, right? So what I would encourage people to do is pay attention. Like, open your eyes. Sometimes it's like a billboard you saw, and then when you were reading your Bible, the same thing that was on the billboard popped out of you on the scriptures, and then all of a sudden you're having a conversation later in that day, and somebody says the exact same phrase. If that happens, you better pay attention. The Lord is speaking, right? Nope. Like, open your eyes to the way that the Lord is communicating to you, because he's not trying to hide it. He's trying to make it very clear to us. Right. And, if we're in prayer and we're experiencing the sacramental life, we naturally will be listening. You can't help but listen. Right. So I love that idea. And we had like I don't know, like 8 other questions to go through. And
but man, time flies.
And we're already at our time.
Wow.
I was just trying to see if we wanted to wrap up with one other question before we, I don't know. I really like this question about the saints. How can the saints and their examples inspire us to find and live out our purpose in life? Oh, is there a saint that you're drawn to at all?
Yeah. Obviously my confirmation saint, St. Peter,
my favorite pope.
Yeah. Mine too. He, just so relatable, and just his struggles in the faith, but also being like, through all those struggles, he was still Jesus's right-hand man, right? And the guy who was chosen to do the job. And so I kind of relate to that. Like, I feel like I mess up a lot, and sometimes I feel like I'm not the right person, but, God has chosen me for something beautiful and something that, only I can do, which is crazy. But even more so, Saint Maria Goretti is always a personal favorite of mine. Just her willingness, her devotion at such a young age to sacrifice for the faith, not just her lifestyle, taking care of her mom after their dad left, and taking care of her siblings because, her mom didn't really do much, or she had to go tend the field, so she couldn't really, pay attention to her kids. But even sacrificing her life in the face of great evil is just it's always so inspiring, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
if someone that young can do that, I can do that. you
Yeah,
know?
for sure. I like what you said about Peter too. I mean, when you read the scriptures, you're like, oh my gosh, it seems like Jesus called him the devil, right? Like, get behind me, Satan. Whoa! But he wasn't calling Peter Satan. He was calling out what Satan was trying to do through Peter, right? And but also when Peter was going to get his feet washed, and he's like, no, Lord, you can't wash my feet. No, And he's like, and then Jesus like, this is something that I have to do. And then Peter's like, okay, well then wash all of me. I feel so much like Peter in that way. Like, okay, fine, I'm all like, and Jesus is like, oh, calm down, chill. I just need your feet.
Yeah.
So I definitely relate to him as well. But, my confirmation saint was St. Bartholomew, and his devotion to living for Christ cost him his life. And in a brutal, he was skinned alive. He was brutally murdered. And they didn't do it slowly. Or they did it slowly. Sorry, they didn't do it fast. They did it slowly and asked him all along the way, do you really believe that Jesus rose from the dead? Do you really believe he's God? Yep. And take pieces of flesh. And he never gave up that faith, no matter how hurtful it was, no matter what suffering he was going through. He was going to have faith. And I look at that in my own life and in my own vocation and say, there's suffering, yes. This life is imperfect, yes. There's heartache, yes. But I love God, and through all of that, I will stay faithful to the Lord. And so maybe we can take something away. Maybe there's a saint that, while you're listening, you're thinking of, or maybe you don't know any of the saints. I would invite you just to find one. Maybe start with either your birthday and see who's the saint on your birthday, or maybe there's a story you heard about, well, who really is Saint Nicholas? Did he really, is he really Santa Claus? Or why is there this? Look into a saint and just start with one. Just look at one and see if the life of a saint can help you to draw closer to the Lord. Because I remember growing up, Michael Jordan was it for basketball. So I had posters of Michael Jordan. I wanted to be just like Michael. If I want to be a basketball player, I want to be just like Michael Jordan, right? And that's what our saints are. And that's why we choose them for confirmation names. They are role models and examples of how we can be like Christ, right? Ultimately, of course, Christ is the example that we want to be, but others can help us to get there. And that's why we look to the saints. So if you want to know what your vocation is, or what you're supposed to do with your life, look to the saints. See how they did it. Watch how their lives unfolded. Draw close to them too. See how they did it and put it into practice. Okay, we're going to leave it at that. We'll definitely podcast again sometime. You're natural on here. You must come from good lineage or something. I don't know.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, something crazy. But we really appreciate you guys listening, and we're going to be praying for you, and we hope that the Lord moves within you in a way that you can understand, which I know He will, but I guess more so we pray that you listen to what the Lord wants you to do. That's all we've got for you today. Please like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time on Happy Hour.